We go to the Q&A session, and we receive quite a lot of questions. And although we have received quite a lot of questions, we also welcome your questions if you have, and you can do it with the chat box. I mean, send a message to the host through the chat box. Let me read out the questions then. We have the questions from Charles Mock from Hong Kong. He says,
this is Judy. I see Charles' question and would be happy to answer if that one was for me.
Sure.
I'm not sure.
Okay. The question says, yeah. I wonder when you recommend legislation and regulations, are there successful examples we can reference, including from outside of Asia? Yeah, Judy can answer this question, right?
Sure. I will. I looked through all the questions and I wrote some quick answers to as many as I could that looked like it was this area. So there's many different examples. We have a section on our site that has web accessibility policies and regulations. We will be updating this soon, but basic principles, have clear requirements, make sure to have some monitoring and some consequences if organizations aren't complying. Many industry partnering with different sectors to get them educated can help. And my impression actually is the combination of things being used in Hong Kong SAR has a substantial degree of success in awareness. We hope that people will go where possible for WCAG 2.1 AA level. I'll leave my question at that. If Charles wants more, we can email after.
Okay. This is Chen Yao. So Charles Mock, by the way, is the legislator in Hong Kong representing the IT industry. So he cannot come here because he has another meeting. But he knows the technology very well, so he is able to attend 2 meetings at the same time. So thank you, Charles' question. I think in the case of Hong Kong or around the region, you can use the disability rights law, the ordinance guaranteeing disability rights, and therefore access to information technology, access to web is one of them. So it is, in a way, a negative legislation. Is a defensive way. Okay, if you find websites not accessible, in principle, we can bring it to Equal Opportunity Commission. But there are also legislation that can do positive promotion. Say, for example, if the government can introduce procurement regulation or subvention regulations by requiring subvented organization, universities and social services. That's also a possible way to promote accessibility. So thank you. This is a supplement.
Thank you. And we got another question, maybe for Chen Yao. This question is from Anne. She says, from the PowerPoint data just now, Hong Kong seems to have satisfactory scores in most categories. Is that good enough though, or is that need for more improvement? Also, how does web accessibility affect unemployment? Is it an issue for Hong Kong?
Okay, Hong Kong is doing well in some category, but not very well in others. For example, in the online shopping and healthcare. So Hong Kong also doesn't comply with all the 10 criteria. In the, say, for example, many of the friends who are using HK TV more, they find it difficult. So let me talk to Ricky Wong after the seminar about this. And also there are a lot of websites which have some problem in some areas. So even telecommunication, media. So there are lots of improvement in Hong Kong websites. So we might pick on some of the good aspects when we do the testings, but in the ideal case, a lot of websites still have obstacles. So in terms of the employment, I think Robert brings in a good question, a good aspects of accessibility. So he says HSBC is promoting staff facilities, webs accessible. So that becomes a problem of employment, because some of the employers say, okay, our internal technology, technical systems are not accessible. Therefore, and we cannot change just because of you, you know. So there are these kind of things. So we hope that software designers for commercial applications should consider accessibility as an integral part. The accounting software, the human resources management, the CRM systems. So if they are made accessible, then employers would not have that kind of problems or excuse in some way. So I think this is still a big area for improvement. So thank you.
Sorry, could I respond briefly with regard to employment? Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. So we are noticing major problems around accessibility and employment. I will mention two things and then one helpful thing. But there are barriers on many online application forms so that people with disabilities do not even get the opportunity to apply for jobs. So this, we think, is a targeted area that's very important for the disability community to push for. Additionally, we're noticing increasing problems with AI bias, artificial intelligence bias, in automated employment testing that can automatically exclude people with disabilities because they may have a different way of going through the test. They may need more time, or they may not be, the test may not be configured so that they can answer. This is one place where the procurement legislation that Chanya was mentioning earlier can help, where one must ensure that there's an accessible platform anytime that somebody is procuring information technology, so that that is in place in advance of individual employee needs, and also comprehensive accessibility requirements for every part of the employment process.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Ada from Hong Kong. If there is there any study about economic benefits or market potential of businesses in making the web or mobile services accessible? May I ask Judy to answer this question?
Be happy to. I had mentioned earlier that the Web Accessibility Initiative has a resource that's called the Business Case for Digital Accessibility. And that looks at several different aspects of the business case, including technical benefits, financial benefits, reduction in legal exposure, and social benefits. But we also, along with that, have started to collect case study data from businesses that have made their sites accessible and then experienced broader market reach or greater return. We would love to collect more such information from more diverse types of businesses, but we welcome people to look at the appendix to the business case for digital accessibility because we have a little bit of that data.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as some data shows, there are a billion people with some forms of disability. The age group is growing old, and people therefore have some forms of visual limitations. So accessibility does increase your customer base. Robert mentioned me demonstrating payment through PayMe, the app, which is made very accessible. A lot of blind people are using it for purchase, and the delivery ordering systems, we know which one is accessible, and we promote among our community. So Uber is good, although it's not yet legal in Hong Kong. Sorry about that. So a lot of web accessibilities are now being used by the community, but there is not enough study, not enough data to make the case known to the other suppliers. So I think this is an area for more academic studies.
Okay, thank you. Another two questions for Robert. Question from Kwok Pui King. Saw that banks got almost full mark in the web accessibility survey in Asia Pacific. How does Hong Kong banking sector perform? And another question from Ivy. What is the common issue that visually impaired users encountered when they use the banking services? Robert.
For the first one, I can only speak for HSBC. So I think overall we are doing quite good, but and we actually work quite closely with Hang Seng to also help them. But with that regard, I don't think I'm in a good position to speak for the entire industry. But I know that through Hong Kong Blind Union, there are a lot of banks that actually reach out to Hong Kong Blind Union to do accessibility audit and review. So I'm pretty sure that the awareness are pretty high among the banking sector. So hopefully everybody, just not only HSBC, but everybody in the banking sector will improve, and we will actually make digital accessibility more our core business and ensure that everybody can access. For the second question, I would say sometimes, most bank will have, I think one of the trends is like banks, of course, is more risk adverse. So we actually do a lot of checks when you log on or when you access the system. So I think that is something that most people will fall into traps. For example, if you do use a validation process that are not accessible, then that would be, that means that nobody can even get through the door. Then means they can't even access your banking service. Another is like if you rely on a hard token or like a separate physical token to access online, then you are like creating more challenges. But I think overall in a trend that a mobile app is getting more common, and banking mobile apps are getting more comprehensive and more service oriented. With the latest biometric lock-on and everything, I think that just to get into the door process are getting better and better. But I think that would be the most important, and some of the time that people get get stuck is actually the front door rather than the inside process.
Okay, I may supplement. I think that, let me clarify. According to the report, we only find 2 countries with banks that fully meet the 10 criteria. So it is not a very good record, I would say. So near Australia and Hong Kong. And in the case of Hong Kong, only HSBC, by the way, comply with all the 10 criteria. All the other banks are just coming along after the Bank of Associations guideline. So they are catching up. So it's a case of a lot of catching up here. So Robert is, of course, has to be very friendly to his competitors, but we can be very frank. We have done a lot of campaigning to make the banks aware and change. We bring them to Equal Opportunity Commission. We organize press conferences. We demonstrate and we make complaints. So it's a long years of work of campaigning. And now we are beginning to see changes, okay? So we have some ETC machines equipped with voice that enables blind user to use them, and apps beginning to be more accessible. So yeah, in conclusion, this is not, we cannot wait for others to fulfill our needs and to realize our rights. We have to go out and ask for it and campaign for it and assert our rights and propose our solutions.
Okay, thank you. 2 questions for Judy. This question is from Ming. Ming says, how about mobile apps and some interactive media like games and gaming accessibility? I hope that in the futures we can have a standard guidelines for these media. And the question from Sarah, what the visually impaired users expect the IT industry to do as a priority issue? Maybe Judy and Chenyo.
Okay, I will start on the mobile and interactive media like games. There are some game accessibility guidelines already that were used, that I think they might use a maybe more informal approach than our guideline, than Ways guidelines, but they were particularly developed to try to embrace the game design culture. And so we have, you know, good colleagues in that area. We are hoping eventually with WCAG 3.0, which will continue to evolve in the future after the first version, that we will expand guidance that will also include games. The WCAG 2 series already includes, I would say 95% of what's in WCAG 2 already applies to mobile. There's some parts of user agent accessibility guidelines that do as well. And we continue to add provisions related to mobile. You can find that by going to w3.org/way/mobile. There's an area that concentrates those resources. Interactive media, we are working also on accessibility of, again, virtual reality and immersive interactive spaces. And I'll comment later on the privacy and security and accessibility thing. I think the second half of this is for Chanya, I think. The visual impairment priorities.
Okay. Okay, we are very worried about AI. People are very happy about AI, okay? They talk about this as the next generation, about blockchain, the use of big data, and so on. but we are very about AI because of the increasing graphical approach, and and a lot of things are being turned over into automatic systems. AI screening in employment. Judy talked about this. That's a horrible thing, okay? Because you screen out, because you basically magnify the stereotypes, the discrimination innate in society, and therefore, and you actually divulge responsibility to systems. So you are talking to a big brother who doesn't have emotions, and you can be permanently excluded from the workplace or even education institutes if your disability is ranked as a negative factor and you don't know that that is being done. This is already part of the insurance industry. I don't know whether people are aware of those, that disability has never been evaluated in the insurance industries. We don't even know that, okay, as consumer. And so we are very worried about AI. And how do we do that? I mean, the IT industries should come forward, talk to us, agree to accept regulations, but people cannot self-regulate, right? So government has a role in doing that. I know a lot of big companies like Microsoft, Google, they have some accessibility, or even Apple or things. Okay, some other company, they have a built-in accessibility department. So we hope that that is in the soul of IT development, not a issue for campaigning for improvement. So, and I hope through this work, WAI is helping us to watch them closely, prevent the problem instead of sort of rectifying it after it becomes a problem.
Okay, thank you. Another two questions for Chanyo and Judy. The question from Henry. Which business sector in Hong Kong that visually impaired users think they need prioritized improvement in accessibility for their website and mobile apps? The second question is also from Henry. Can the technology of chatbot help visually impaired users to use the web? Chanyo first.
And the technology of what? Sorry?
Chatbot.
Okay, thank you. Got it. Yep.
Well, maybe I speak about Hong Kong and the region.
Yes.
And Judy can cover the rest of the world, or even, I mean, they might be the same. But I mean, for visually impaired, I cannot speak of one industry as a priority. I would say it's everybody. I think as citizens, yeah. What do? We communicate, we consume, we produce, we interact. And so presumably every vehicle, every framework needs to be made accessible to us as a citizens. So we are fighting obstacles whenever we meet them. So I can't say which one is a priority. I think public sector, government certainly is a priority, and they cannot just they have the opportunity of leading the society. They have the responsibility and the resources and the opportunity to lead society to change. So if you ask me to choose, then definitely government first, and then government should leverage the rest of community to follow.
So Henry's other question regarding chatbots, I want to comment a little bit more generally, which is W3C is doing work currently on real-time text and real-time communications, and actually let me echo and emphasize something that I think Chanya was saying, which is like we need all of the technologies to be accessible. Every digital technology needs to be cross-disability accessible, because otherwise we as people with disabilities get shut out of the modern world. And you never know which technologies you may need in certain settings. There are interesting issues that come up with regard to real-time communications. It's been very important to the deaf and hard of hearing community. For instance, when there's an emergency, for somebody to be able to report their location, what type of emergency it is, and so forth. And there's kind of a duplex facility that's getting implemented more in some countries. But at the same time, that needs to be implemented in a way that doesn't cause problems for people using different kinds of chat functions with screen reader access. Because you can have, like if somebody is typing and it's revealing to an emergency provider as the typing is happening rather than at the end of the sentence, that can cause a problem for some people who may be using it with a visual impairment. So one of the things we're trying to do is to try to come up with solutions that work effectively for different disability constituencies at the same time, so that the needs can get addressed in a way that has some user configurability potentially, or at least doesn't collide. And I think there's very rare examples where technology needs conflict. Sometimes you just need to think it through. I'm sorry, I think there was one question earlier on intersections of accessibility and security. I don't know if we missed that. If it's possible to still comment briefly, I would love to. I think that's a really critical area, but if we don't have time, that's fine.
Yeah, sure. You may respond to it first.
I think this is a very important question from our perspective, as the need to try to improve security advances. Figuring out how to do that, including, for instance, in the financial sector, is very important. And we actually are looking at the intersection of three things: accessibility, privacy, and security, so that, for instance, developers don't assume that the way to accommodate disability is by browser sniffing people's assistive technology, thereby potentially making their disabilities discoverable through the network, which could even put people in physical danger when combined with geolocation on mobile devices. So part of that is an educational issue, which is to ensure that people can have security without exposing their disability, if they don't want to. Also, so that screen readers are not perceived as security attacks when they approach systems. That's been one of the most important issues to work, I think, in the financial and some other areas. So again, in W3C, we try to take all the web for all variables, put them together, and come up with something that works across those solutions together. So I would love for more people to join us in that combined work. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question from Kitty for Robert. From HSBC's experience, does it take a lot of resources to comply with all the criteria listed in the HK Association of Banks? And also, and the criteria listed in the HK Association of Banks guidelines on barrier-free banking, is it resources or is it the low awareness that prevent other banks from making all the necessary changes? Robert, please.
Sure. I think it's you require a lot more resources if you are going to fix a problematic design. If you have a accessible component library, if you design a web page that based on a responsive behavior that actually works with a clear system, and if you use more native component, and like on mobile app, use the native iOS and Android component. On web, you use the basic HTML like drop downs and input. You will, if you get it right in the first place, it's very easy. I think a lot of problems we see in the past is, for example, designers like to create their own drop downs, say add a flag within it. That means that everything needs to be customized. And during the development process, every sprint team may do their own coding. And that means in the end, some may be accessible, some may not, and some may work differently. For example, another example is if the designer designed the website, didn't even cater for dynamic font, that it didn't even provide a layout guidance to the developer. What if the font are enlarged 200%? That means everything will be broken. If you go back and fix those, it will be very resource intense and costly and time consuming. But if you plan everything out correctly, with all the basic behavior being designed and a set of already reviewed accessible component, I would say it's very straightforward.
Okay, thank you. And other question from Anne again for Chen Yao. Is there any data on the difficulties in web accessibility regarding unemployment?
No, I don't have data. I wonder if Judy has any.
I commented earlier about some of the types of barriers we're seeing, such as even the gateway into employment, such as application forms, and then the filtering out of applicants with AI bias. I will just, so I work internationally for the most part, but I also track things in my country, United States. The Department of Labor accessibility projects, I think, are continuing to see a high level of unemployment in the disability community. I'm sorry, I do not have verified up-to-date data on that, but I think some of the, I think that the use of automated employment testing may be having a major impact, major negative impact on the already low employment in the disability community. When my understanding is this is because of every dimension of continued stigma around disability, as well as the technological problems. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact statistics on this.
No problem. Because of the time limit, we may not be able to answer all questions, but I will ask the last question. This question is from Arthur. Is there any way to recognize colors in using Excel format? And then other questions from Guraf. Is there any websites to learn digital accessibility?
Judy?
Judy, please.
I will take the second question. I'm not able to comment on Excel, I'm sorry. With regard to learning about web accessibility, I invite you to, digital accessibility, I invite you to visit the Web Accessibility Initiative page, and also to consider taking the MOOC, the Massive Open Online Course that we have offered on Introduction to Web Accessibility. It actually provides a good introduction to digital accessibility as a whole. And again, if you're looking for something short, the TED Talk is trying to picture an accessible future and what will get there. But there's many different technical as well as awareness and intro educational resources on our site, and many from other websites around the world as well.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you so much for all the speakers who share their experience and expert. And Chen Yao will give a final remark. Please, Chen Yao.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Well, thank you very much for staying up to now. The most people online, I read 135 people stay on. That's wonderful. And in some time zone, it is past midnight already. It shows how important this issue is and how much it has attracted attention of both consumer users, developers, IT, industry, and government. And the report will be online, certainly areas of improvement. I hope that it can be an instrument for affiliates, WBU affiliates, to do your in-country lobbying advocacies. Across countries, we can share resources and expertise and experience. So from the questions, I seem to get the impression that our report have given a rosier picture than the reality. The fact is, there are many obstacles, areas of improvement. We definitely are not in a rosy picture. There are possibilities that IT provide, but they're not being fully utilized for inclusion and realization of equal rights. We see we bring up the examples today, good practices, in order that to prove that it is possible and advantages to be inclusive, but we are not yet there. A lot of effort needs to be done. So I urge you to be partners with us, everybody, and we move forward in every country where obstacles exist, and we collaborate so that we share our common mission of being able to build an inclusive society for all. And IT should be an opportunity, not a threat to inclusion. So thank you very much. The Hong Kong Blind Union is very grateful for your attendance and trust. And we will hope to engage with you in future. And finally, a big thank to Judy and a big thank to Robert for being with us, and a big thank to the president of the World Blind Union to spend time with us, and your leadership will make a lot of difference. Thank you very much. And thank you all for participating.
Thank you for the opportunity to do so. Thank you all. Best wishes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.